There's no doubt that we are still a nation divided in many ways, and it's not just between black and white. As we learned yesterday, men and women are having a challenge, and the gay community's made huge strides after their Supreme Court ruling. But it is natural. It's a part of being human to mistrust and be uncomfortable with what is not familiar. The mind habituates to what is familiar. So if you don't look like me and you don't act like me and we have different values, I'm going to be a little slow to open and trust. And I get that. The problem is now is that if we don't start putting some serious attention on it, I think it's going to come back to really harm us as a nation and harm us as individuals. And I want to that end, I want to just shift, if we can, a little bit. I want to talk about this notion of white privilege. Because candidly, the majority of the white community has no idea what that is. As you ask a fish, well, how do you like the ocean? What ocean? They have no idea. It supports them. They breathe it. It's a part of who they are every moment, but they have no sense of what is supporting them. So I've been very lucky. My dad used to call us members of the Lucky Sperm Club. Born in this country, with the color skin that we have. Life, we had our challenges, of course. Everyone does, but different challenges than a lot of members of other demographics. And before I get into my opinion, how do you see white privilege? How would you define it? Or how would you explain it to someone who just has no idea what you're talking about?
Well, as you say, when you're part of the dominant culture, you don't really realize that you have advantages economically, educationally, professionally, in all aspects of society. And you just kind of take it for granted. And so it's hard, I think, for the dominant culture, the white culture, to even see that unless it's spotlighted, unless their attention is drawn to it. I guess the question I have for you is, how has your attention been drawn to white privilege?
Well, that's huge. Well, because I started looking into it and reading up about it in preparation for this, the way I saw it was this. When I see a police officer, my first initial emotional reaction is positive. Oh, there's a police officer.
Even when you're being stopped for, let's say, a
here's
traffic violation?
I have been stopped for traffic violations. I've talked my way out of most of them, but the ones I didn't talk my, I deserved it.
Right.
I was speeding. I did something foolish. So I own that, take my medicine. That's their job. I don't resent them for that. But my first, I had good experience with cops my whole life. When I was a little boy, one kind of didn't save my life, but it got me out of a perilous situation. So very positive outlook on the police. I know that not all black people can say that. In fact, I got a feeling, especially with inner cities, blacks, it might be a tremendous source of consternation. So that's an aspect of white privilege. I expect my government to work for me. I expect the police to work for me. I expect the schools to educate me and my children. And there's certain things I expect this country to run appropriately and fairly. And if it doesn't, I raise my hand and say, that doesn't work for me. And I think the biggest thing as a person, a member of the dominant culture, is to realize that isn't the way it works with everybody, especially not with blacks. And to have some compassion around it, and to work to make it fair. To work to at least make it so that it's a level playing field. I don't think you have to give anybody anything, but at least take the impediments out of the way.
Sure. Yeah.
And just by putting your attention on it and knowing that it's a possibility that it exists, it's changed the way that I have interacted with people in society. And it's been a humbling thing. No one wants to be told that they're unconsciously abusive. But by participating in a system that supports some and doesn't support others, it's an unfair system.
And, I think affirmative action has tried to address that, and it seems like, whites have pushed back even against that and even tried to turn it around and say we're being discriminated against. And I think that really reflects this still unconscious sort of entitlement, and maybe even conscious entitlement that whites have. And so how dare we have set-asides for blacks who've been discriminated against forever in this country, and to have to challenge affirmative action or to try to reverse it and play the victim, being the dominant culture. I mean, that's the kind of thing that really will challenge any black person when they hear about this kind of thing. And we've had some conversations about that. And so I think it's an important thing to do. Affirmative action really kind of highlights the significance of white privilege and tries to rectify it. But again, even that gets pushed back.
There is the mindset in aspects of white America that say this. We're right now a little constrained. We have we have huge deficits we're running. We just had a tax cut that benefited mostly the very wealthy, but You cut back revenues, you don't have a similar cutback in entitlements, it creates more debt. So they're saying slavery ended a long time ago. Public school is free, and I don't see why we need to have any more set-asides, like you were said. And I'm still kind of torn with it myself. I see there's a lot of wisdom in it. It's been a lot of years we've had them. Is it time to stop them? Is it time to continue them? That's a conversation that'll probably be...
Well, the question I have for you, has tribalism gone away?
No. Intensified.
Okay, so you've answered your own question.
Yeah. And absolutely. And I have friends who had sons and daughters that couldn't get into school because there were set-asides and there wasn't enough room. They were frustrated by that, and they paid taxes. And they said, why am I paying taxes? And I'm giving my spot up for my son for someone who doesn't pay as much taxes. And I could see their point as well. It's a delicate thing when you talk about the welfare of your children and having access to housing and opportunities. I mean, tribalism is real, but also self-interest is even more powerful. I mean, you want to get a place to live or a place to go to school or a place of opportunities, and they're not available to you, it can be very frustrating.
But when you say they're not available to you, maybe you don't have the whole pie, but can't you be satisfied with like 3/4 of the pie?
Well, it makes a lot of sense. There are people in this country who believe that white people founded this country, which they did, built this country, grew this country, became great in this country, and
wait a minute. When you say built this country,
absolutely.
let's get real.
Yeah.
Who really built this country?
Absolutely. This is what they believe, though. And what I'm trying to help them see
Yeah.
is that a lot of people helped build this country.
Right.
And it doesn't belong to one race. It belongs to the collective.
Yeah, sure.
And especially when we kidnapped a race of people to really serve us in the most menial and the time important way, we cannot now deny them the fruits of their labors generations after that. I want to talk about this whole notion of being stopped for being black. Barbecuing while black, driving while black, standing at a protest while black. I know I personally, there's a recent incident where this white woman, saw a black man driving 2 white children in the back of his car. Right. And she called the police thinking, I guess he was going to kidnap them or do something terrible with them. It turns out he was their babysitter, paid for by their parents. And other incidents about black kids in public schools. It's just the point now where enough is enough. And we need to talk about why there is such fear among certain members of the white community towards black people. I don't know what it could be, and I'd like to hear what you think, why white people are so afraid of, certain white people are so afraid of blacks.
Well, I think you're probably better qualified to answer that question than I am.
There is an absolute fear. They fear you're going to be violent. They fear you're going to take what's precious to them, hurt their children, take their belongings. And the only thing that I can come to as a non-professional, as a non-psychologist, is there must be some kind of collective guilt from the time of slavery when we treated blacks as chattels and property, and in many cases misused them, abused them, and there's maybe a collective racial guilt. And because we feel bad about it, we think, well, you must be, if I'm feeling this, you must be even angrier, and I don't feel safe in your presence.
But, the interesting thing I've observed is that since the current president has been in power, this sort of tendency for whites to just dial up and say, I see a black man doing this or a black person doing that and calling the police, that's intensified. It's created even more of a polarization. Now, that didn't happen as frequently. At least I didn't notice that kind of thing being that prevalent until, the last couple of years. It seems like there's been sort of almost permission given for whites to actually be more extreme in that regard. So, I think what needs to happen is our leaders need to be more conscious of the impact that their position and their role has on society. Because, they can say one thing or, skew a conversation in a certain way, and it ripples down through the whole society. And when you're the most, the powerful leader of the most powerful country in the world, it affects the whole world, not just our culture. So then you see this happening all over the world, these kind of polarizations between, like, say, not just blacks and whites, but, liberal and conservative, even, empowering neo-Nazis. I mean, that's not happened before in modern society. Now, that's even coming. So this is a bigger issue. It certainly is an issue between blacks and whites, but it's actually rippling out into, society at large.